für richtig hältst, ob du glaubst, diesem Jahr für dich eingesetzt haben. Im Dienste meines Volkes. Gib du jetzt eine Stimme ab. Wenn ja, dann tritt für mich ein, so wie ich für dich eingesetzt bin.
Meet Adolf Hitler. Fresh from the war and returned to a Germany changed wholly, the future Fuhrer plots his path to power. The time is November 1918 and Germany has surrendered. Like millions of others, Hitler must now contend with the defeat of the Central Powers, the new German Republic, and democracy within the realm of the former Kaiser. Hitler once described the war as the greatest of all experiences and excelled in taking on the most dangerous missions. Other than his medals, the now 29-year-old Hitler returned home to Munich with his German patriotism reinforced like never before. Following the signing of the Treaty of Versailles the next year, which blamed Germany wholly for the war, imposed crippling economic sanctions on the country, and dismantled the military, Hitler became a part of the surging tide of hatred against the Jews, Marxists, and political leaders they believed were responsible for stabbing the country in the back. It would be this maelstrom that Hitler and men like him would exploit to tear the country apart in the years to come. For now, Hitler remained within the army, unable to find work anywhere else. In July 1919, he was moved to the reconnaissance unit with the task of infiltrating the German Workers' Party, led by Anton Drexler. It was the German Workers' Party that would eventually become the Party of National Socialism, known as Nazis. From their first meeting, Drexler was impressed by Hitler's speaking. With his army superiors ordering him to infiltrate the party, Hitler applied to join and became party member 555. Even before Hitler took control, the party believed in much of the ideology that would define the Nazis, including anti-Semitism, anti-capitalism, and anti-Marxism. Above all, they were fanatically nationalistic. At this early stage, Hitler showed his view on the Jewish question in September 1919. In a letter to Adolf Hitler, he wrote that the aim of the government must unshakably be the removal of the Jews altogether. Hitler's zeal and silver tongue served him well immediately. Drexler took no time at all to see his potential and promoted him to the party's chief of propaganda. Hitler seized upon his new role and resigned from the army to enter politics full-time. But before continuing with Hitler's story, it's important to provide some context about this period in German history, specifically Bavaria. Following the end of the war and the establishment of the Weimar Republic, the country was plagued by far-right revolutions under the Freikorps, demobilized former soldiers, and far-left ones under the Marxists, who saw an opportunity to replicate the rise of Lenin and the Soviets in Russia. Bavaria's traditional separatism also saw it become a hotbed of revolution, including the failed 1920 Kapp Putsch that attempted to install a nationalist government. Many of these right-wing revolutionaries would even come to join the future Nazi Party. By 1921, Hitler had already seen the potential in these former soldiers and organized them into groups of armed thugs under Ernst Röhm's new SA to protect meetings and harass opposition parties. Röhm's connections also ensured the Bavarian government turned a blind eye to their activities. It was this combination of national anger, economic turbulence, and men willing to fan the flames that made the growth of figures like Hitler possible. And Hitler, with his natural talent for speaking and manipulation, took full advantage. Come the spring of 1921, Hitler was in full control of the party, coercing various members of its executive committee to resign or intimidating them into submission. Simultaneously, this was also when many of Hitler's most devoted followers would join him, including Hermann Göring and Rudolf Hess. Due to Hitler's importance in profile and fundraising, he boldly tendered his resignation as the party's executive committee bickered. His main condition to rejoin was that he would replace Drexler as party chairman. He won the subsequent vote by 533 to 1. Now Hitler was in full control of a rising political party and was one of the leading figures in Bavarian politics. Former Hitler Youth member Alfons Heck recalled the power of Hitler's character. "We erupted into a frenzy of nationalistic pride that bordered on hysteria. For minutes on end we shouted at the top of our lungs with tears streaming down our faces, 'Sieg Heil, Sieg Heil, Sieg Heil.' From that moment on, I belonged to Adolf Hitler body and soul." Despite solidifying his power over the party, his progress relied entirely on the political climate. But Hitler's uncanny lucky streak continued. As France and Belgium occupied the economically vital Ruhr region in West Germany, due to non-payment of war reparations, the economy collapsed. The old German mark became worthless, reaching a peak of 4.2 trillion to the dollar in November 1923. Food riots struck, savings were wiped out, and wages were reduced to nothing. Across Germany, revolutions in at least 4 states threatened to crush their respective democratically elected governments. But in Bavaria, tensions between its government and Berlin reached critical mass. Against the central government's wishes, Gustav Ritter von Kahr was appointed as Bavarian State Commissioner with near-complete dictatorial powers. Kahr would order General Otto von Lossow to refuse to act against the Nazi Party and other similar parties. It was this fateful decision that not only reinforced Bavaria as a safe house for far-right movements from across Germany, but also pushed men like Hitler to attempt to recreate Benito Mussolini's march on Rome in Italy, which had taken place the previous year. Hitler, who had already formed a pact with famed German war hero General Erich Ludendorff, gathered his SA brown shirts for a revolution to take over Bavaria. The Nazis struck on November 8, 1923 at a beer hall called the Beer Cellar. They seized Kahr, Lossow and other leading government figures at gunpoint. After forcing them to support his national revolution and agree to a march on Berlin, Hitler released them. They immediately went back on their promise. The following day, 3,000 Nazis, with Hitler at the front of the armed procession, marched through the center of Munich. The police, whom Hitler had expected to join him, opened fire. 14 Nazis and 4 policemen were killed. Hitler himself was shot in the arm and quickly bundled into a car where he escaped. He would be captured and arrested 2 days later, and his dreams of taking control of Germany shattered. Many of his compatriots that day managed to escape arrest by fleeing to Austria, including Göring, but Hitler, Ludendorff and many of his closest allies were charged with high treason and sent for trial at the Bavarian People's Court. It was here that Hitler gained not only national but worldwide fame. With many of the presiding judges sympathetic to Hitler's cause, the trial became a farce. Rather than answering questions, Hitler repeatedly gave long, fiery speeches to the court, which were duly reported across the world. He was also protected from deportation back to Austria by the judge. Additionally, when the Berlin government attempted to have him deported anyway, the Austrian chancellor refused to accept him, claiming that his service in the German army made it impossible to return him to Austria. Ludendorff was acquitted due to his status as a war hero. Hitler received just 5 years imprisonment, but would only serve 9 months in the fortress prison of Landsberg. Initially, upon his arrival, prison officials were so terrified that Hitler's guards would free him after his arrival that they wanted to assign him death guards. But Hitler made no noise or ever attempted to escape. Although Hitler had escaped a long prison sentence, the Nazi Party itself largely vanished during his absence. Kahr's government cracked down on the party and others in the aftermath of the coup, and most of the party's leadership had either fled abroad or were in prison. During his stay in Landsberg, Hitler didn't bide his time. He wrote his autobiography Mein Kampf, or My Struggle. Most of his words were dictated as part of ranting speeches and diatribes, but these were polished and would become a huge source of information into the future Führer's mindset and philosophies, and still relied upon by many historians today. On the 20th December 1924, Hitler was released from prison, ready to begin rebuilding his movement through the legal democratic system. One would think that Hitler and the Nazis would pick up right where they left off, but Germany had changed in the year since the Beer Hall Putsch. The economy had stabilized, and parties like the Nazis had been banned from operating in Bavaria. Hitler was forced to seek a meeting with the Prime Minister of Bavaria to lift the ban on his party. In exchange, he agreed to only seek power through legal democratic means. The ban on the Nazis was lifted on the 16th of February 1925, but by the 27th, Hitler had been banned from speaking after giving an inflammatory speech. This ban would remain in place until 1927. Truthfully, the Nazis struggled as Germany appeared to prosper again. To the average person who was now far more secure economically, Hitler's rantings didn't have the effect they once did. Furthermore, the war was fast fading from the minds of many Germans. For the first time since the war, Germany was largely stable, and that meant Germans were too. But this state of affairs wouldn't last for long. On the 24th of October 1929, the Wall Street crash struck, causing a global economic crisis. Germany suffered more than most as America called in its loans. Millions became unemployed in a matter of months as people lost everything. Now Hitler's message was as simple as freedom and bread, which became a staple of Nazi propaganda in the early 1930s. Once again, Hitler knew how to take advantage of an opportunity. As Germany was renegotiating its war reparations with France yet again, Hitler forged an alliance with Alfred Hugenberg, a nationalist newspaper magnate. It finally gave the Nazis a platform to reach a nationwide audience. The alliance also brought Hitler into contact with a new type of person. Rather than angry nationalists and thugs, Hitler found himself interacting with industrialists and business people. These were the men who would financially enrich both the party and Hitler personally. But for all the triumphs of this period, the true victory was that the Nazis had migrated from their Bavarian birthplace to become a party that covered the whole of Germany. In the election of 1930, the Nazi Party gained more than 18% of the national vote, making it the second largest party in the country's parliament, the Reichstag. This represented a stunning turnaround from the less than 3% it had won just 2 years earlier. Yet at this time, Hitler still had never set foot inside the Reichstag because he couldn't. After giving up his Austrian citizenship in 1925, Hitler remained stateless. Without the proper documents, Hitler could not run for any political office. But in 1932, Hitler's newfound power offered the breakthrough he had been searching for. In February of that year, Nazi Party member and Interior Minister of Brunswick, Dietrich Klaggs made Hitler an administrator of Brunswick's delegation to Berlin. By virtue, Hitler became a citizen of Brunswick, which gave him his German citizenship. It also paved the way for Hitler to challenge war hero and sitting President Paul von Hindenburg for the presidency that spring. After a hard-fought campaign, Hitler was soundly defeated in both rounds of presidential voting. In many ways, it was to be expected. Hindenburg's reputation preceded him, and since he was a member of no party, it became extraordinarily difficult to pin him down. Despite this setback, Hitler's profile continued to strengthen, and he became the biggest force in German politics next to the president himself. Nobody knew it at the time, but it would be the last presidential election until Germany was reunified in 1990. The Nazis would soon turn this failure into a success. Later that year, 2 successive elections resulted in the party becoming the largest in the Reichstag, but still well short of a majority. With no other party willing to enter a coalition with them, and Hindenburg also without a majority, Germany found itself in deadlock as the Great Depression raged on. During this time, Hitler demanded the chancellorship, but Hindenburg, who despised Hitler, did everything he could to keep him away from the office. It should also be noted that Hindenburg did reach out to Hitler several times that autumn, but each time Hitler refused to engage. Hindenburg and his allies were becoming desperate as 2 chancellors fell, and the Nazis continued to maintain their popularity throughout Germany. It took now former Chancellor von Papen and Hitler's ally Hugenberg to find a solution, and this resulted in a letter to Hindenburg from several prominent businessmen and industrialists, known in English as the Industrial Petition. Part of the letter read, "The transfer of the responsible leadership of a presidential cabinet equipped with the best material and personal forces to the leader of the largest national group will eradicate the dross and errors that inevitably attach to every mass movement and will rouse to affirmative strength millions of people who today stand on the sidelines." Interestingly, the Nazis were mentioned alongside other right-wing parties in the letter, but Hitler himself was never mentioned by name. However, to anyone reading the letter at the time, it was clear what the 16 industrialists were asking for. With no other option, Hindenburg was forced into submission. Since much of his support as president derived from conservative religious businessmen, he felt as if he had no other option but to agree. Realistically, Hindenburg had no other choice. For as long as the Nazis remained the largest party in the Reichstag, the only realistic choice for the chancellorship was Hitler. On the 30th of January 1933, Hindenburg conducted a brief ceremony in his office. As part of the deal, Wilhelm Frick became the Minister of the Interior, and Hermann Göring became the Minister of the Interior for Prussia, giving the Nazis control over practically every police force in the country. Hitler himself was appointed Chancellor, a position he would hold until his suicide in the bunker in 1945. Finally, There would only be one more election until reunification in 1990, held in March of that year. This one, however, would not be considered free or fair. With the second most powerful position in Germany secured and his party in control of the police, Hitler was closer than anyone realized to assuming total dictatorial power over Germany. The silent birth of the Third Reich had just taken place. So there we have it. If you have any comments, criticisms, or corrections, let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.